Welcome to Week 3, Drafting Rulings Part 1, Introduction and Ruling. During this week, you have read the required readings, in which you firstly analyzed how to draft findings of fact and conclusions of law. You have further assessed the content of how to review draft legislation to establish how legislation is drafted in relation to an advanced rulings procedure and gained insight into examples of rulings and decisions. Lastly, you have evaluated a video into the 6 steps of the importance of legal drafting. We will be discussing the above briefly in the slides to follow. How to draft findings of fact and conclusions of law. In order that a finding of fact and conclusion of law can be properly drawn, one must become familiar with 2 distinct processes by which each are determined. Ultimate facts or findings of fact are determined by a process of natural reasoning, and conclusions of law by a process of artificial reasoning. The line of distinction between what are questions of fact and conclusions of law is not one easy to be drawn in all cases. It is quite easy to say that the ultimate facts are but the logical conclusions deduced from certain primary facts, evidentiary in their character, and the conclusions of law are those presumptions or legal deductions which, the facts being given, are drawn without further evidence. This does not quite meet the difficulty. One must deduce the ultimate fact from certain prohibitive facts by a process of natural reasoning. We draw the inference or conclusion of law by a process of artificial reasoning. But this last process is often in such exact accord with natural reason that the distinction is scarcely appreciable. An example would be A sues B for services performed. The latter pleads payment. Here payment becomes the ultimate fact to be established. B proves that he employed a large number of men and was accustomed to make weekly payments. That A was observed among others at the time and place where payment was made. That a considerable period had lapsed since A left the employ of B, during which time the former made no claim. These are circumstances from which, as evidentiary facts, a jury may presume the ultimate fact of payment, but the presumption is one of fact and not of law. Again, suppose the same case, but that the time prescribed by statute of limitations in bar after action has run. The law steps in and presumes the payment. The result reached may be the same, but it is reached by a different process. Again, the same fact may be found to exist as a deduction from other facts, which for that purpose are treated as evidentiary, or the law will take such evidentiary facts, not as evidence in the sense in which we use that term when applied to the investigation of facts, but as a basis from which to presume the existence of the ultimate fact of conclusion. We have no doubt but that the terms title and owner considered in the abstract above are facts and may be found as such, which will be discussed in the next slide. The question to determine who has the title, who is the owner, is quite a different one, and will usually depend not upon the natural deductions from the facts in proof, but upon the application of those legal principles found to apply justly to all like cases, and when necessary and thus applied to work out a result, the conclusion is one of law or a mixed question of law and fact. To illustrate, A and B, parties to an action tried by a jury, each hold a conveyance, in all respects regular and sufficient, in form to convey the title, executed and delivered at different periods by the holder of the paramount title. These facts established, and manifestly, as we think, it would be the duty of the court to find as a conclusion of law, that the title vested in the one who first received a conveyance. Such duty arises not because title is or is not a fact, but because it cannot be determined by the application of the process of reasoning adopted for the establishment of facts, pure and simple, and must be determined by the application of the process of artificial reasoning adopted by the law, and then, thus determined, we designate the result a conclusion of law. If the meaning is clear, we have conveyed the impression that in legal proceedings it is, in many cases, the means by which the result is to be reached which must determine whether a given conclusion is one of fact or of law. If from the facts in evidence the result can be reached by that process of natural reasoning adopted in the investigation of truth, it becomes an ultimate fact to be found as such. If, on the other hand, resort must be had to the artificial process of the law in order to reach a final determination, the result is a conclusion of law. In the reading of Preble Q.C. 1996 draft legislation to establish an advanced ruling procedure sets out advanced rulings process that may have been adopted in the UK. It provides for applications, determinations, issuance of rulings, appeals, fees, anonymity of applicants, and publication of rulings. One needs to review the procedure and to note the explanatory notes as to why each section is drafted and the requirements, process, effect, methods, time periods, amongst other procedures laid out for each section. Legislation, rulings, and decisions. Section of International and Comparative Law Bulletin, High and Online Reading. Sets out examples which you need to read for further understanding. Please note the following example. Tax deductions for Cuban seizures. The Internal Revenue Service had issued a new ruling permitting tax deductions for business holdings seized in Cuba under Premier Fidel Castro. More than $1 billion in American property was confiscated in post-revolutionary Cuba. Losses, which are personal, such as furniture, clothing, automobiles belonging to an American who lived in Cuba, which property was seized by the Castro regime, may not be deducted under this ruling, as these were not business losses. If an American owned farms, which he ran solely for profit and loss, his farm and all payments of rents therefrom, the taxpayer can claim ordinary loss in the same manner as other business expenses. Although where a taxpayer owns stock of a Cuban subsidiary, all of whose assets have been taken over, the stock is deemed worthless and the taxpayer may claim a capital loss deduction. If 95% or more of the stock is so owned, the taxpayer may claim an ordinary loss deduction. The 6 steps to good legal drafting skills. Step 1. Get the facts. You need to obtain and absorb all of the facts that are relevant to the dispute, and that will assist the judge in resolving the issue. These facts must be supported by credible evidence. The client's version of events must be plausible and supported by undisputed facts and available evidence. A key test. Do you believe it? Step 2. Identify, rank, and test disputes of fact and disputes of law. Once you have obtained all the facts, you need to determine what issues or disputes arise from these. Identify disputes of facts and disputes of law. Rank these in order of importance, dealing with the most important one first. Test the issues, refer back to your client, and be sure that the manner in which you both interpret these disputes aligns. Step 3. Contextualize the issues. You know the facts now, have worked out the legal issues. Now find the law. Establish the applicable area of law and then contextualize the issues. Your job is now to correctly identify and understand the law, explaining it before you can apply it to the facts of your case. Step 4. Understand the law. The next step in the process is to gain an understanding of the applicable legislation and the leading cases pertaining to the issue at hand. You must be able to cross-reference every legal reasoning with the law or legal authority. Write a short chapter summarizing the rule in your own words to help you focus and test your understanding of the rule. Step 5. Applying the law to your facts. Legal rules have distinct elements which must be proved for the rule to be applicable to the facts of your case. The strength of your case is determined by how well you can satisfy each element based on the material facts of your case. To do this, you will need to have a thorough knowledge of the facts of your case. Step 6. Reach a conclusion. Your conclusion must be supported by the facts of your case and by a legal rule. The best place to find support for a legal rule is in the most recent decision of the highest court. You do not need to present more than one decision. This week's learning outcome will form a valuable foundation for the weeks to follow. You are encouraged to read further on any additional readings if you can, including the readings required for this learning unit, to guide you in your drafting of your introduction and issue to a ruling. You are further tasked to evaluate the 6 steps to the importance of good legal drafting in terms of the video. Join me for the next week as we draft rulings part 2, discussing statutory law.